All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Lisa Varello, and for those who were already here during the last streaming of the last webinars, you already know what we're doing, but we are right now in the fifth episode, let's call it this way, in the fifth episode of these webinar sessions conducted by our expert, Debora Barletta. This time you can hear me speaking in English because this specific webinar is intended to be spread also across the country, let's say, and abroad, so that it can be also understood by an international audience. And in this case, we decided that this last fifth episode of this webinar series will be about conspiracy theories. As a background, this webinar is in path that is part of the project Miles, which is about fighting disinformation and fake news spread, especially in the education sector. So we are involving in the project teachers and students in order to reach this objective. But in this case, we are also allowing also all the rest of the people who are interested in the topic to gain some more skills. I would like to introduce you Debora Barletta once again. She has been our incredible speaker for the last 4 episodes, and she's an expert in the topic and in the no hate speech movement and in the youth worker environment. So I would like to introduce Debora. I mean, you can explain yourself what we're going to do. And I would like only to tell all the audience that it is possible to receive an attendance certificate at the end of this fifth webinar. And as always, either we put the link in the chat or in the streaming in the comments, or we will tell you to just send me an email. But we will see later. It depends also how the streaming is going and all the technicalities, let's say. So welcome, Deborah, once again.
Thank you very
And thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, of course, to Danilo Dolce and to the Project Miles for organizing this webinar. Some time has passed. It's now the fifth in English, so to reach a even a wider audience. And I'm really happy to do that. And we picked up quite a pop topic, which is conspiracy theories. My hope is that through this webinar, we will understand why it is important to talk about conspiracy theories when we want to talk about fighting disinformation and media and information literacy. So I will also refer to some of the topics that we touched upon in the previous webinars. So, you know, the Italian people who got to listen to that will hear back some of the same topics, but for those who didn't, of course, I will put some information and also some sources that you can use, because it's very important to say this is an informative webinar. We're gonna be together for 1.5 hours. It's impossible to cover everything in full detail, but it's also important to know that all the sources that I will use will come from my personal experience, my personal work with the organization I cooperate with, so with the Council of Europe materials, but also, with some research I get to do with my media and information literacy work in these past years. But, the hope is always that you use this as an input to do, of course, your own research, hoping that you will do it in a proper way, because, we will see how doing your own research can be dangerous sometimes, especially in connection with the topic of today. As usual, I will be sharing my screen to show, to use some slides that will support what I'm gonna say. I don't know if you still see my face. Okay. Probably yes, even though the connection may be a little bit slower if you do like that. But the important thing is that you hear my voice. Then you can see the slides, so you don't miss a lot by not seeing me moving properly. And since it's going to be kind of a dense webinar, to clarify what we're going to talk about, is going to be like a road that we're going to build together. We're going to start, of course, by defining a little bit what we consider to be conspiracy theories and how they work. Uh, and then, of course, why we consider them threats in the current scenario, who benefit from the spread of conspiracy theory, and of course, when there is benefit, there is somebody that is paying consequences. So what's the cost of the spread of certain conspiracy theories? And of course, if these are dangerous things, what we can do to take action and to stop the dangers connected with the spread of conspiracy theories. And you see at the bottom that I quote a book. This is called Suspicious Mind by Rob Brotherton, that is being considered an expert. Disclaimer, I haven't read the whole book, but I read the blog. I read the blog by Rob Thornerton. There is the link here, but if you look at the Rob Brotherton blog, Conspiracy Theories, you will find it. It's kind of a old school blog, and there are a lot of things related to conspiracy theories. But I must say that in Italy, lately, we are lucky because there is a lot of content produced on the topic. There are journalists like Leonardo Bianchi or Pietro Salvatori who have newsletter, podcast that are dedicated to the topic. And there is a reality I will be mentioning also later on that is called Facta. Factanza, they do fact checking, but also debunking of many conspiracy theory, and they're very, very useful. But in every country, there are this kind of networks and community, and I will refer to that also later. But just this to give a framework of what we're gonna see today. Also, because one thing that is important to clarify is that when we're talking about conspiracy theory, we're talking about a very specific phenomenon. We're not talking about, I don't know, the urban legends or the creepypasta that were so popular in the first days, of, I don't know, of YouTube, the rabbit holes that you will look for late at night when you were on the internet and you were a teenager, or folklore urban legend that can be fascinating, like do chupacabra exist or not, because these are kind of beliefs, theory that are not dangerous per se. They can become dangerous when they do take on some of the feature of conspiracy theory that we're going to see now, but per se they're not considered dangerous. Okay, they can be when they demystify, for instance, the scientific method and the scientific authorities. In that case, they do become dangerous, no? When they, doubt what is history and science, then they became dangerous. But having people believing in the existence of chupacabra is not something that I will deem as problematic. But to further explain to you what we define as a conspiracy theory and why it has to be considered something dangerous for our society if they become too powerful, they are tales, okay, but not simply tales. They are based on big traditional narratives. those kind of narratives we grow with. For instance, that we need the good guys, the bad guys, a secret mission or something. And what makes the conspiracy theory called as such is that it's taken for granted that there is something secret that is hidden by the majority of people. So it's not something that it's on, open air, but it's something that we get to know thanks of the work of few people that get to know the truth and tell them outside the traditional channel. Okay. And so they conspiracy theorists, in order to exist, they need to have the belief that there is kind of a hidden power, somebody operating behind the scenes. Okay. And it's an enemy that operates behind the scenes to do something bad to us, good, normal people. Okay. Of course, this means that if these people are uh, hiding something, the official channel, so we're talking about official science, governments, are hiding something. So everything that usually is considered as reliable is actually a cover up. Okay. And when there are no evidence to support the conspiracy theory, it's because the official channel cover up those proof. It's not that they don't exist because these conspiracy theories is just something invented. No, they really don't have any proof because there is this hidden power that, in cooperation with the official power, wants to cover it from us and from the heroic people who wants to dismantle it. And of course, and we're gonna see this more in detail when we talk a little bit like how they're successful, um, is the fact that you know uh, there are many big events, not in history, in life, and some of them are so big they cannot happen just by chance, or because there is a kind of a cause effect that can be inscribed in normal things, but there has to be something more powerful. Okay. And this is something that help people to make sense of big complex event rather than investigate the complex causes, and to acquire what are deeper instruments and tools for understanding. It's easier to believe that there is simply an hidden power that orchestrates everything. Okay. And it's also very important to say that conspiracy theories have always existed from medieval times, and they were spread to, kind of weaken certain people, to put people against others, the spread of illnesses, and we see also the parallel with COVID-19. But let's say that it's conspiracy theories are very much connected with humanity itself, and this is something that is dear to me, not because conspiracies and evil thing are inherent to the human nature, but because wherever there are power struggles and the need for dominance, this kind of dynamic emerge, same as dynamic connected with the hatred and discrimination. And this is also one of the reasons why we are talking about conspiracy theory, talking about media and information literacy, and connecting with some of the topics we already touched. So just to say that it's kind of something that is very much connected with some of the social dynamic, especially connected with the establishment of power and in some way oppression. So there are, of course, and this is psychology is not my major, of course, but there are studies, and some of them I discovered through the blog I mentioned before, that of course try to investigate why conspiracy theories are so successful even now in 2026, when there are tons of materials that can kind of, debunk with facts and figures many of the beliefs that are behind conspiracy theories. And we'll see actually that the fact that there are so many information is one of the causes why now they're so abundant. But beyond the reason that we'll see when we talk about the benefit, if we investigate the human psychology, of course, we see that conspiracy theory seems to respond some psychological needs that we have. First, it's called like an epistemic need. So they help us making sense of the world. As I said before, complex things happen, very complicated, that affect our life without us necessarily understanding why. And conspiracy theory seems to jump in exactly connecting the dot, even creating links where there are none. But in the creating those links, gave us a kind of a sense of clarity, even though if it's fictional. And of course, this sense of clarity is connected with what comes next, which is this feeling safe and in control. If I Even if there is something hidden, no, that is orchestrating, like a puppet master that is behind all the things that happen at a major level, even though it's a scary thing, it's still reassuring to know that these big things happen because somebody wanted them, because there was a plan, there was something in place. And this fictional sense of clarity and connection, it's somehow feeling reassuring, because it says, okay, it's something that potentially I can be in control of, or I can oppose to, or I can find way to resist. And of course, the last one is the fact that around these conspiracy theories, there is the creation of true communities. Okay, so these people that are united by conspiracy theories feel even stronger their common communities or groups, because they are connected by the sense of having a mission, of unveiling what is hidden, of helping the good guys to prevail against these hidden enemies. And such a motivation, of course, create an inner strength and a very, very strong sense of belonging, that of course it's something that as human beings we long for naturally. And so this explained to us a little bit how these things are successful. So they do respond to a psychological need, but they come from something. Okay, why they form in our brain and how they become no recurrent, uh, this can be explained if we understand a little bit how bias work. There are several forms of biases, and conspiracy theory really rely upon some of them. First one is, recognizing patterns. So our brain, for the thing also I mentioned before, feels more content if it can identify certain patterns. Okay, so when there are even random events, our brain try to make sense of it using our experiences, uh, past, thing that happened to us, but also what comes from our culture, upbringing. And through that lens, we create those links I mentioned before, that even though they relate only to our perception of things, that and when I say our, I mean of course not only a personal one, but one coming from the society we come from, the social group we belong to. And this can be a very strong way of reading reality. And of course there is another one that is, I think, is the most interesting, that is, this agency detection, that is, attributing certain happenings to a um, agency. So somebody had to have planned this. Okay. While we know that certain events are planned just in parts, but other consequences or the implications certain actions cannot be possibly mentioned beforehand. And even more so, this kind of agency detection is particularly dangerous when we think about people not believing in climate change, in which we have, for instance, many of the chemtrails group believe that natural disaster are not consequences, so indirect, of course. So of course the people that are polluting don't want big disaster to happen, but they're part of the polluting system. But rather than accepting that CO2 and polluting agents have affected the climate, they prefer saying that there is some hidden power wanting to use climate bending to climate manipulation to control the world. Okay. So we see how this intentionally bias in this kind of conspiracy theory is very powerful. And of course, the proportionality bias, so the fact that big events need big explanation, and it's much more fascinating, for what I said before, that we like stories as human people. It's much more fascinating to to think that there is some evil or even satanic group wanting the collapse of the world, rather than as a consequence of a society built on profit and capitalism, some things happen. Okay. But again, these are how these beliefs uh, form, regardless from facts and figures. And of course, they can become unshakable, as is written in the slide. So, one of the most fascinating things about conspiracy theories, and we will see also in the last part of the webinar when we will talk about how to react, how to contrast these, this tendency, is that once a person starts to believe in a conspiracy theory, all their action are basically designed to confirm uh, that theory. And this is particularly dangerous now when internet exists, because with kind of an infinite um, resource gathering, it's possible to find the proof for everything if we want to, and use it to sustain our theory. So this means that possibly I can find an article written by somebody supporting basically any theory, and that's the difference, for instance, of applying the scientific method and using what are authorial reference, people that actually do research that corroborate their affirmation, rather than just using theoretical things or making links that are like coincidentally or kind of based upon reflection. But unfortunately, with the internet scenario, it's very much easy to fall into this kind of traps. And that's why, again, it's important to read conspiracy theories within the framework of media and information literacy, because if we know how an algorithm works, now that we know the algorithm is very much profiled upon what we start, what we like and what we tend to follow, it's very easy that we will, once we start looking for elements for things supporting our conspiracy theory, we will progressively find more and more sources that confirm that theory. That doesn't mean that we are right, but just that our algorithm works very well. But if we are media literate, we know where that comes from, and we don't give that the power of absolute truth. And of course, in the same way, everything that we will find that is, on the contrary, seems to contradict our conspiracy theory will become part of the so-called counter evidence. So it's proof that somebody wants to cover up the truth that we have uncovered. So it means that you're really on something precious, because if the big powers, if the media want to cover up that, it means that, we are right. There is something they want to keep hidden from us. And fact checkers or debunkers are simply like soldiers of, the opposite army. And here we are entering on the question of why this becomes dangerous, because you can understand in a system where, you know, official source of knowledge, the scientific method itself, history, what are the basis of our knowledge. And on this, I also want to be clear: it's not necessarily the critical thinking. Critical thinking is very precious, but critical thinking shouldn't be applied to demystify something that is the scientific method that is proved in the healing illnesses, in predicting, for instance, weather and climate thing. Critical thinking must be used to deconstruct what are cultural myths, what are misconception, what are things that instead don't are not based upon fact but on our biases. So basically the opposite, of what is used, what people that believe in conspiracy theories believe they're using. And it's very important. In fact, there is a document that I recommend you to look upon, which is the document made by European Commission and UNESCO. On the website, there are also some infographic that made the topic a little bit more understandable. Introduce the topic of why they're dangerous, because and that's why also at the beginning I said we are not talking about creepypasta and urban legends. When we're talking about conspiracy theories, we're talking about theories that create an enemy. It means that they create division in our society. They weaken, as I said before, some of the basis of our knowledge, basically relying on what is a feeling of inner groups versus outer groups, and potentially fostering what are violent attitude, as we will see. In fact, is not um, is no mystery, is no coincidence that uh, extremist movements and populist political figures really lean on conspiracy theories, not necessarily believing on them, and that's probably the worst part, but taking advantage of the people who believe in them. And one clear example is Donald Trump and how he behaved around QAnon, that we will see in a second, but also the theory of the so-called great replacement or the Kalergi plan. Okay, political figures do not necessarily believe in these conspiracy theories, but they take advantage of people who believe in them, reinforcing those part of the conspiracy theory that most fuel division and polarization to gain political gain. And of course, there are commercial actors. We will see that more in detail when we're talking about who benefit from that, but also some so-called foreign actors. So when there are geopolitical interests and things like that, conspiracy theories can be very, very much useful to spread, again, polarization and division. Why? Because they tend, as I said before, in fact, they're very similar to the mechanism behind hate speech. They're very much connected to this creation of the enemy, meaning that they play very well in what are some of the most radicalized narratives. Okay. So they are identifying by DRAN, which is Radicalization Awareness Network, so the network in Europe that works precisely on radicalization. They have been identified as radicalizing multipliers, meaning that they are the real tool for some of the most extreme ideologies that now affect our societies, bringing disastrous consequences. We're talking about white supremacists, far right, but also for instance, when state become radicalized in their violence, we are seeing that in Israel with genocide in Gaza, but also with religion is being used as a tool. So with the ISIS in the so-called Islamic State. And on the right, you can see some of the Europe most successful conspiracy theory that are connected with these dangerous movements. The first one I already mentioned is the called Great Replacement or Kalergi Plan. In Italy, we have people who are now in the government who, during their political campaign, mentioned many times the Great Replacement. We see that also in Germany, in UK, where it's been popularized an awful, horrible concept that shouldn't be present in any democratic society, which is the one of remigration. And is based on the conviction that the whiteness, the cultural superiority of our continent is being menaced by the migration. And we see how in Europe now the majority of governments are populist and far right, and it's no coincidence that now we have seen the passing of one of the most restrictive migration law on our continent that makes deportation legal, similar to what is happening in US with ICE. So Europe, which is like the land of rights and human rights and what so on, is now authorizing and normalizing deportation. Why? Because what was just a small fringe conspiracy theory became successful and has been mainstream popularized by politicians, and now we are paying the consequences with rights to refuge being menaced and denied on our continent, and blatant racism basically entering in the laws of European countries. So you see how, this small conspiracy theory became into practice, and it has inspired mass shootings. In New Zealand, we got Christchurch, but in Italy, we had Luca Traini, and we have many, many people who are convinced that by allowing migration, we are polluting our race, our culture, forgetting that all the countries come from migration. Even people that are nostalgic of the Roman Empire, forgetting its colonial past and the fact that, it was built upon the slavery, like old empire of the world, and violence, forgets that, human empire comprises countries where, ethnicity and culture and races were very much different. And it was great precisely because at some point it integrated all of them. And we had Roman emperors who had dark skin and came from different culture. And similarly, we see that in all the empires of the world and all the great civilization. But, this means when you want to rewrite history and forget how things really happen, you bend that to the narrative that is good for you because it makes you gain voting. But I'm taking too much time to talk about the great replacement theory, but just because it's very, very on topic these days. And one of the second one that is most successful in Europe is the George Soros conspiracy theory that mix a little bit of the anti-Semitic kind of ever successful trope that is always successful all over the world with this idea of having a puppet master. And it's particularly successful because it's true that George Soros benefited financially from, kind of betting during economic crisis, and he got rich. But it's very much disconnected from the fact that he's Jewish, and he is behind, with this, he support this Open Society Foundation that has university, supports a lot of humanitarian work. And since humanitarian work sometimes demolish what are some of the policies that some actors that are from this extremist radicalized view um, propagate, of course, George Soros can be identified as a big enemy. Also, is very rich, so it's very easy to make him as the perfect enemy, the great puppet master behind many of the things that happen in Europe. And there are also some mix between the conspiracy theories on Soros and the Great Replacement, like George Soros is one of the people wanting migrants to arrive and destroy Europe and whiteness of Europe, because we don't know why. But just saying that, we see how these things are interconnected. But it's very peculiar also how many people are very easy to hate and see George Soros as a evil puppet master, but they forget to see, for instance, the what are other billionaires who make very awful things, and are behind many of the politics that influence the whole world. And but they, for some reason, they're far from being targeted by conspiracy theories. And then there is also the gender problem. So the gender propaganda, the idea that there is an LGBTQI plus satanic kind of lobby that influence economic world to distract our traditional families, like it's something that benefit we don't know who, against the poor people, forgetting that there are LGBT people are some of the most actually instead persecuted, targeted all over the world, regardless from ethnicity, race, or belonging. So again, it's not clear why they are considered to be the perfect enemy by many. But again, this happens for a reason, because like using media literacy and the confusion, especially in these times where many things are happening, and the lack of tools by many people, the politicians, the actors who benefit from conspiracy theories can very much fuel these beliefs. And finding these enemies very useful to the narratives that help them stay in power and possibly gain even more power. We see that, for instance, I mentioned before, I didn't include it here, QAnon, because or dread pills and some of the things that, for instance, are in the manosphere that fall in the conspiracy theory too, because they're more American, especially QAnon is American, even if it's influenced Europe. So here I'm mentioning more European valid conspiracy theory. But QAnon, as I said before, is a clear example of how politician, in this case Trump, took advantage of the popularity of this particular theory to gain many votes. And when we talk more in details about why some actors, apart from politicians, have interest in fueling conspiracy theory, it's also very important to talk about the money. Because this is the second point, like who benefit, no? From conspiracy theory. Well, again, I won't repeat that again, but we see how these things pays in terms of platform amplification. So that can translate even in success for political figure, but even about content creators. Content that are connected with hatred, fear, outrage are very strong, connected with very strong emotions, and generate more interactions, more engagement in platform, especially thanks to how the algorithm works, which means money. Okay. Of course, this is connected with the existence of real alternative media ecosystems. We see that happening, especially on Telegram, for instance, when we have so-called hidden channel, or on YouTube, when we have these alternative media outlets that become the solid form of source of information for many people, and they can run ads, fundraising that get them money. Okay. And of course, this can be connected even with the selling of some merchandise. If you want to go to a demonstration, or if you just want to prove that you're part of the group, that you belong to the elite of people who know the truth, you're happy to have a T-shirt that shows that. So, and this, of course, generates money. And there is also a peculiar kind of commercial benefit that is connected with uh, improvement courses. So you have courses, for instance, when there was about COVID-19 conspiracy theory or Novaxers, you had courses of how to heal in a natural way and to avoid medicine, or how to create, in some cases, some devices to defend yourself against 5G technologies and antennas, or in the case sometimes of some conspiracy theories that don't believe in the health system overall. We also see some health practices that are very dangerous, and they're connected, for instance, with giving birth or other medical practices, in which the people who profess that uh, ask for a lot of money, okay, to do these courses and put the people in danger. So we have a clear economical gain. And of course, all these four factors are based on the fact that when you do something very extreme, okay, either promising, great miracles, or, creating a sense of anguish, fear, and anxiety about everything surrounding you. So, whatever you feel stronger emotion, you very much increase the possibility you have to generate engagement. And in this economy, again, engagement, interaction means more money, or in the case of political people, more support, more votes. And here we go about the fact that conspiracy theories kind of have influence sometimes even relationship between countries. And we see that we saw the example with George Soros that is very much used, for instance, not only in Hungary, where he's from, but also from, for instance, Italian politicians or others that use it as kind of a scapegoat for many negative things, thus influencing the perception of people around a particular person. But we see how from many countries we have the activation of both factories, which are these places where there are people who generate content, who comment, who troll, and who circulate certain ideas that influence, for instance, elections in some countries, and are have, or they have interest in weakening a country to gain benefit, or for instance, we have proof on how some Russian bots influenced Trump election in the first mandate. Why? Because it was clear that it would have brought political instability from which Russian could have benefited, which is something that precisely happened when we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for instance. But Russia is not the only one benefiting from this. We have also bought factories in Pakistan or Southern Asian countries, that we know are paid from China to destabilize certain things. And of course, there are certain agendas that are transnational, let's say. For instance, the one that is anti-LGBT rights, that it's very much connected to religious movements sometimes, so that different actors from different countries have all the interests to support to reinforce their position. So we see how these conspiracy theory are becoming a threat to our democratic society. And this is the reason why it's something that we need to understand how to oppose. And of course, why they are a threat to our society, not only for the big geopolitical kind of implication, but also on an individual personal level. Why? When you create an enemy, and that enemy can be identified in a group, it means you are creating a target. Okay. So, for instance, if you are supporting conspiracy theories against LGBTQI people, it means you're normalizing, no, the attack against them. And of course, on a level that is about democracy, when we're talking about things that are weakening the belief in science, in research, you are causing the death of people. I think again, US is paving the way, but also in Italy we are seeing this when there are people that are vaccinated less and less, and we have children dying from chickenpox, from illnesses that were causing death anymore thanks to vaccines. And of course, with COVID-19, we saw the biggest demonstration. But also, when you create a system in which the official media, the government, and the democratic institutions cannot be trusted, you authorize in reinforcing alternative form of government. I don't know, private militias, or even, the so-called self-defense for, reasons that are totally immotivated. And we saw that in a very, very scary way in the assault on Capitol Hill on January 6, 2021. And of course, you also delegitimize what is the political proper power connecting through voting. In fact, it's no coincidence, again, that some populist leaders um, objected voting results, fueling conspiracy theory, not only again Trump, but we see also Bolsonaro in Brazil. And or for instance also in Russia, when we're talking about Ukraine government and so on and so forth. And of course, the thing I mentioned at the beginning, with this scapegoating and polarization, so enabling violence against certain group and certain people. So we have harm on individual level. And as I mentioned now several times, this is what connects a lot conspiracy theories with the mechanism of hate. And of course, creating an enemy, you create a threat that authorize you to take action to defend yourself. And of course, if you progressively not recognize that group, that individual belonging to a group, to something that is so far from you, to lose the characteristic of a human being, it's more and more, it's easier and easier to enabling violence. And this is, for instance, something I think that Israel show the most blatantly in the treatment of Palestinian people. So the existence of Palestine is seen as a threat to the existence of Israel. They are an enemy, and of course, the violence against Palestinian people is authorized by the fact that they pose a threat. And in propaganda, Palestinians are not considered human. You see government officials, something that, in any other government doesn't happen. That's why I'm talking about Israel. When, you got government official, no, maybe Trump did it with some migrants, but anyway, you talk about human beings as animal, as something that is inferior, and you kind of put in people's minds the fact that they're not like you, they don't deserve rights, and they can be attacked. But even not going to the genocide example, to the very, kind of extreme things, if we talk about LGBTQI people, even if they're not called animal, when you call them pervert, sick, when you say that trans people are sick, even though the scientific community has proved the contrary, you authorize the fact that their rights are deprived, that they're isolated, that they are attacked. So again, we can see that this kind of a common behavior, and this apply, it's written at the bottom, to all the other groups that are targeted. I think in Europe probably the behavior against Roma people is the one that is more explanatory of this attitude. For instance, there is the myth that Roma people, in Italy is very popular, rob children, and this authorized to a very, very violent hatred against Roma people at different levels of society. So again, you see how conspiracy theory and hate speech very often go hand in hand. Why? Because they create an enemy. It benefits people, as we have seen. And even though the consequences is violent polarization and discrimination, the people who benefit from that don't feel, bad about it, because they do not only benefit, but they actually put away the dangers from their persona and their groups. But now, in that we know all the awful things about conspiracy theories and why we should worry about them as a society, as individual, what should we do? And good thing is that there is a lot we can do. And probably the most effective way to stop a conspiracy theory from spreading and getting power, so getting to these dangerous consequences that we've seen, is to apply one of the methods that we've seen, I think, in our third webinar, that is the one on fact checking and disinformation, that is so-called SIFT model, that has been developed by Mike Caulfield. You can look for it. And it's a very, very easy way to take action and to stop dangerous behavior online, but also in analogical life. First one, very important: stop. When there is something, as we said before, that is so much leaning on our emotion, other extremely positive one, offering miracle things, or creating us a deep feeling of fear and terror, we should always stop and say, why? What's happening? So strong emotions are a red flag. If something is too ugly or too beautiful, it's legit not to believe it. Okay? Not to believe it, but not stopping in not believing, but actually investigating, which is the second step. Understand where this news come from. It's come from an anonymous channel, anonymous source, suspect. It's coming from a group that is very famous to have strong position on something, also very suspicious. So also, because this can help us to understand who created this, so want this news to spread. If this person, this group, is benefiting from the spread of this theory, I can be even more legitimized to suspect. Because if a news is a news, okay, we are benefiting as a society. The right to good information is a human right. But if there is a particular thing that benefits only a group, I must suspect this. And these apply to disinformation and misinformation, because sometimes we're talking here about of course, conspiracy theories, but it's a good rule also when we want to apply our critical thinking, even when we're seeing a post shared by a reality, by an actor, an author that we truly respect. If it's leaning on these things, we should suspect all the same, or we will forever blocked in our algorithm and in our bubble, meaning that our thought will be always influenced by someone else and not by our ability to investigate, to analyze, to go further, which is one of the most beautiful things of being a human. But going forward, after we investigate, we understand where these things come from. If a news is a news, it's impossible that really nobody's talking it about. So I will go looking on, on web and seeing if the same thing is reported, even if it's in a different way, but just that the item exists in the net, it's good signs. If it doesn't exist at all, it's something that should get me suspicious. And with conspiracy theories, of course, that happens a lot, and it connected with the second and last step, because when we cannot find this source, this news on any other source, but some that are similar thinking, or sometimes you even have this chain that you look for an author and you find that author referenced by the same websites and the same newspapers and whatever, or the same channel. Of course, this doesn't matter as a proof, because they're all interconnected and supporting each other. It matters when you find also other players, other actors reporting that thing. And of course, even more useful is to understand when this thing was firstly generated, and go back to the original source. Because again, if we find some players that have clear economic or political motive, it means that that thing is not that for the benefit of society or you as people, but it's because it's connected with all those things. Okay? So again, SIFT model is fundamental to debunk conspiracy theory. But sometimes what happens, especially in how the social feed and internet works nowadays, as I said before, we are in our bubble, in our algorithm. So if you're a person that normally doesn't believe in this conspiracy theory, or you don't have anybody in your contact that does or propagate that, you are very, very difficult to encounter them, because now we're in an ecosystem, in a digital ecosystem, in which we can have possibly very, very different feeds according to who we are and what we do. This means that there are some things that can go totally unnoticed by us. And on the contrary, a person that is dear to us or is close to us, by chance, because they believe to a I don't know, I'm making a stupid example, but they believe in the existence of chupacabra and of aliens, and they believe that aliens built the pyramids, which is something innocent, no, per se. But because they put like on this kind of content, they start entering the rabbit hole of conspiracy theory connected with the non-existence of climate change. Okay. But it's a person that is close to you, and you encounter conspiracy theory through them, not directly. What are some things that you can do? So SWIFT model is to avoid the dissemination and blocking, but sometimes the conspiracy theory is there. This is Christmas table, you're with your family, and somebody talks about it. What you should do? This this is again another similarity with the hate speech, and we see in specific like some do and don'ts. But the evergreen tip is to avoid things from even emerging. So, said truth, there is not much you can do after a person is really into the loop. Okay. But if you manage, especially with younger people, to give them tools and resources regarding media and information literacy, how algorithm works, how to trace benefits, and uh, that us as humans are biased and we have some things that can be manipulated, the more you protect them from that manipulation. So you have to build resilience in yourself and in the people you can affect. It's the same thing, like when we talk about safety in general. How can I be safe? I cannot possibly avoid all the things that can put me in danger, but I can instruct myself to react properly to avoid those conditions that put me in more danger. And this is always the best solution. Okay, so pre-event. Okay, and um, this, of course, is not always the case. In fact, we are seeing other tips, but this is also the reason why we are having this webinar talking about media and information literacy again, because this is um, part of the toolkit we should all have. Because if we all have this way to resist ourselves, these theories that harm people, harm our societies, have no oxygen to survive. Okay? But again, we are at the table, we have family members, people who really insist on some of this theory. What should we do? Of course, we start from the don't. Don't make fool of people who believe in conspiracy theory. We saw it can be a psychological reflex, especially in moment of fragility of a person. Finding a sense, finding meaning in chaos, finding a community where to belong to are all legit reason to fall into this trap. Of course, it depends on the relationship you have with the person. No feeling of fragility should never authorize the willingness to harm or to discriminate any other people. But if the people you are dealing with are in this category, okay, you have no use, you have no interest in making them feeling smaller or isolating them, because you authorize them to fall even more into the trap of conspiracy theories and of the conspirationist groups or even of radicalized groups. And because it becomes an attack to their identity. So you should always focus on the thing they're believing, not to them. So not the fact that they're stupid, they are ignorant. These are things that never work. And plus, in certain contexts, ignorance is not a fault. There are people that are born in conditions in which they couldn't have access to culture, to books, or in school systems that do not, fuel critical thinking. And actually, we're seeing attack at school in teaching post-colonial studies or for instance, the perspective on slavery and things like that. So they are going in the opposite direction. So it's not easy for people to resist this kind of thing. So we shouldn't take it for granted and not attack a person because beliefs, but focus on the thing they believe in and focusing on deconstructing that. But how we deconstruct? For sure, not starting sending tons of links on saying that you are smarter and the source that you follow are better than the other person wants. That doesn't work. You, because they can get defensive and they will start saying, okay, but I got my sources, you got your sources, who is right, who is wrong, and it becomes like an ideological war, while instead you are getting in this conversation because you care that this person stop spreading those things. So, what to do? Ask them. Enter a conversation. Also, because this is something maybe I didn't mention enough. One of the causes that people really crave to belong to groups is because maybe they feel lonely. So actually, you deconstruct this tendency by creating a bridge, asking a question. So, why do you believe that? So, of course, they maybe start by mentioning some sources, some alternative media things. But if you start, keep question like, yes, but where do you think they get this from? Are you sure, like, are you sure? Maybe it's not even a good question, but like, where do you think they get it from? Like, when did you start believing in this? You know, what, how does that make you feel? Because of course, if they talk about fear, anxiety, you can start saying, but do you think it casual, or like, acknowledge that fact that this is very important, recognize the negative sentiment. This is also very important when we talk about hate speech. We shouldn't demonize negative sentiments. What we should demonize is the exploitation of bad feelings to harm other people or to make profit. So it's legit that a person feels anxious about the world collapsing around them, but making them understand that that anxiety doesn't go away by attacking a group of people that usually are even, in a more unfortunate position that we are. Okay. And especially if you have people close to you, build on the relationship you have with them, on the trust you may have, the power you have to affect them, and treasure that. Okay, because conspiracy theory creates enemies. So if we want to really contrast them, we should find communities that are based on through alliances, on overcoming difficulties, not communities built on fighting the same enemy. Okay, so that's how we really deconstruct the these violent and dangerous tendencies. And of course, to achieve all of that, it doesn't happen over one discussion over a dinner table or in a comment section under a picture. It needs time. It takes time. Conspiracy theory, benefit from the need for immediacy. We also say that with hate speech, they fuel reaction. We need to respond to things. So to use our humanity, what is complex about us. And that takes time. We need to give ourselves and the other person, the other people, time to dissect things, to interrogate, to even put our beliefs in doubt, because the benefit should be mutual. So in our relationship, we shouldn't try to win over the other person or to win an ideological battle, but we should be together in a process that would allow the both of us to find some sort of fulfillment of an answer that, or if not an answer, like a motivation or something to improve together, to find solution that benefit more people, again, not belittling or resolving by finding other enemies. Even though, we can see the enemy is the system, is capitalism, is the structure, we can recognize this is not a person or a group of people. It's a system that self-reinforces itself, and we cannot certainly deconstruct it by finding fighting other people. But of course, when there are criminal things happening, that also should be clear. That should be denounced, that should be censored, and action must be taken. But after the action is taken, we should ask ourselves why that thing happened, why that person fall into loop, because everything in that realm is a failure that falls upon all of us. If you are losing a person to a conspiracy theory, to a radicalized group that wants the demolition or the annihilation of another group of people, that's a failure for all we stand for. So it should matter to all of us. And we can do something, but we need to invest time and resources in that. As individual is difficult, but we can do it when in our small spheres of influence with our friends, with our families, colleagues, co-workers. And again, there are very easy tips like applying the SIFT model that can be very easy to apply, even if you're not a tech savvy or, a journalist, investigative journalist kind of person. And to close, remember again that you have the power. So every small action matters, and you can represent something meaningful in the life of a person. Okay? Never forget that. Everything matters in the good and in the bad. So you have power to affect the good. So identify the structure, not find individual enemies, or could be Trump, Netanyahu, or Putin, or whatever. Doesn't, you know they're supported by system. Even if they fall, the system that enabled them wouldn't fall. And to do that, as I said before, we need to build on the relationship on trust that we have with people. And if you don't create those bridges, okay, don't isolate people that think this way, but understand why they think this way, why they believe such horrible theories. And of course, we are human. We are not superhuman, superheroines. Don't take for granted that you have to do everything on your own. There are networks. I mentioned the Italian ones. We have Facta, we have Pagella Politica, we have many, many fact checkers all over Europe, all over the world, that do the work for us, even if you're lazy. But especially, you can even ask for human support, you know, how to deal with something, with your feel of anguish. So there are civil society organization, there are courses that you can attend to, and they can make you stronger to resist this, because it's something you don't have to do on your own. Okay, and that's also the reason why we're having this webinar, because likely you can be the one helping somebody else, and creating that network for somebody else, or making them discover an existing network. So with this, I finished. This is also, this is my contact, and I'm also put the logo of the realities I'm cooperating with, and because many of the sources and practices I developed come from working with the Noise Speech movement, the Italian international one, the National Networks Against Hate Speech, Hate Phenomenon, United Network Against nationalism, racism, and fascism. And they produce content that goes in this direction, and also on media and information literacy. So I finished, and I really, really thank you very, very much for sharing this space with me, but also all these webinars. Has been a true privilege to help, support this mission that hopefully will benefit all of us. And thank you, of course, to the center, Danilo Dolci, for allowing this and for inviting me to be part of this journey together. Thank you.
Deborah, I thank you a lot for all these 5 webinars, for your cooperation, and it's been incredibly useful also for me to understand the process and the phenomenon that you talked about so incredibly clearly. And I'm sure that we will cooperate in the future again on this topic in miles. But in the meanwhile, I also wish to thank all the people who participated, all the people behind the curtains, let's say, in the backstage of these webinars, and for their cooperation and their patience. And I want to remember also to all the participants now that they can have an attendance certificate if they send me an email, which is lisa.amarello at danilodolci.org. What else? I think that's all from my side. Again, thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.